Welcome back to Miss Ewing TV. Today we're going to draw a fall pumpkin. So here's my example, and I'm going to start. This one I drew tall. I turned my paper tall, but I'm going to start on my new paper. This time I'm going to draw it wide, like a landscape. So first step, I need to write my name on my paper, and you'll have to write your class code. And then I'm going to flip my paper over. And when I'm drawing a pumpkin, I want it to be nice and big and take up most of the space on my paper. So I'm going to lay my hand on my paper and trace around my hand lightly. And then I can connect. And some pumpkins are more round, some are more oval, some are more tall, some are more wide. So it doesn't matter what shape you draw. Where the stem comes in on your pumpkin, it sometimes kind of sinks down a little bit. So if you want to draw a little bit of a curve at the top, you can. Sometimes it's a little bit flatter at the bottom, so if you want to flatten that out a little bit, you can. And then you can just take your eraser and erase those extra pencil lines. Now I'm going to draw a stem at the top of my pumpkin, so I'm going to draw a little bit of a curve, but sometimes those stems are straight. It's up to you. They usually are a little bit wider at the bottom, and they get skinnier as they get closer to the top. And then you might see like the little part where it was cut from the stem. If you want to draw some texture in there to show the texture of the stem, you could put some lines on there. And if it was freshly picked out of the patch, you might even see a little curlicue coming off of your pumpkin. All right, now I'm going to draw some lines on my pumpkin to show kind of the ridges and to show that it's round. These lines will help show that the pumpkin is round. So I'm going to start right about here, and I'm going to curve to the left. And then I'm going to start on this side, and I'm going to curve to the right. Now I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to do it a little further out here. And I'm going to do the same thing over here, curving it out to the right. Now I can decide if I want my pumpkin to sit in the grass or on some leaves. This line that I'm drawing back here is called the horizon line. So that means this is all the ground, and this is all sky. If I want to draw grass, sometimes I just draw kind of like zigzags. Sometimes they curve a little bit. If they're closer to my horizon line, those little zigzags might be smaller because they are further away from me, or they'll appear to be smaller. Same thing, I can do those kind of zigzags, maybe some tiny zigzags out here. If I want to add some leaves, I could draw some leaves down here by my pumpkin. Same thing, if I have a leaf that's off in the distance, it might appear to be smaller. All right, so now I'm ready to use a black crayon. With the black crayon, I'm just going to trace over all of my pencil lines. And the reason we're tracing over our pencil lines is because we're going to be using watercolor paints. And crayons have wax in them, and they create kind of a barrier. So when I use my watercolor paints, they'll keep my watercolor paints from going places that I don't want it to go. So it'll kind of like create a little wall. Trace all of my leaves and my grass on the ground. Even trace that horizon line. And once I'm finished tracing my pencil lines, I'm ready to paint. All right, so we're going to be using watercolor paints to paint our pumpkin. I have watercolor paints in this little tray. You'll share at your table with the paints, and you'll share water with the person that sits across from you. I'm going to start off by painting my pumpkin. So I'll leave the paints up there. And I'm going to be doing what's called a wash. And a wash is where you get your paper wet with water first. So I'm going to paint the whole pumpkin with water first. Trying to stay inside that pumpkin. It's a little bit hard to see because it's clear. Just a little bit of water inside my pumpkin. And what a wash does, it allows you to get a quick, even, kind of light coat of paint on your paper quickly. So my pumpkin is wet with water. Now I'm going to use my paint and I'm going to add some water to my watercolors, gently stirring it, keeping your brush on its tippy toes. You shouldn't smash it down in the paint. That'll give it a bad hair day. Okay, now you can see how it spreads. That's kind of cool. You can just spread that color out nice and evenly. Because it's all wet at the same time, it will dry at the same time or close to the same time, and that keeps it nice and even. If I want it to be a little darker in some places, like maybe darker along the outside edges, I can just stir my paint a little bit more. The more that I stir that paint, the darker it will be on my brush. So I can add a little bit darker orange to the outside and it'll kind of fade into that lighter parts, darker out here. That kind of makes it look more like it's round. All right, now for smaller areas like my stem, I don't have to get my paper wet first. I can just paint directly onto the stem. But when I get to my sky, I'll probably want to get it wet again. So maybe I'll just do this side first. And then I'll do the other side next. So I'm going to get my paint wet. Stir, stir, stir. The more I stir, the darker it will be. Spread that color around. And when you do the grass, you could get it wet first if you want to make a wash, or if you just want to paint wet paint on dry paper, that's fine too. It's a little bit smaller space down there. All right, I'm going to stop there, but you can finish on your own.